Good afternoon and welcome. It's wonderful to have you all here in person. If you'd be so kind as to silence your cell phones at this time, we'd be most appreciative. I'm Courtney Graham with the Engagement Programs team, and I'm thrilled to have you all here joining us today to discuss the monumental occasion of the reframing of the beloved Sunday on Le Grand Jatte, 1884. This afternoon, we have the pleasure of hearing from Kirk Vollmont and Gloria Groom. Kirk is the Associate Conservator for Preparation and Framing in the Department of Conservation and Science. And Gloria Groom is the Chair and David and Mary Winton Green, Curator of Painting and Sculpture of Europe. Both Gloria and Kirk have a long history with the museum and with this iconic painting. Now, please join me in welcoming Kirk and Gloria and enjoy this brief video trailer.
It's amazing that this young artist who, at 26, made his first campaign for the Grand Jatte, and who dies 5 years later, that this painting, which came to our museum almost 100 years ago, continues to delight and to mystify and to be the subject of scholarly research. And the frame is very much a part of that history. And so it's great to be here today to share some of that with you. And I thought it would be good just to quickly back up, just to give you a sense that the Art Institute has always been, as far as, well, I've been here sort of forever, in the importance of the frame and how it, especially in the 19th century, especially around the time of Impressionism, when they were breaking the rules of painting, and they also had very specific ideas of how they wanted their works to be seen, not just in the grand salons, but in these alternative exhibitions. And so you have an artist like Degas, who, along with Pissarro, were really the ones who were making some big changes in what they thought a frame should do and be. And this is just one page of maybe 40 different pages of profiles of frames. Now, Degas wasn't against the gilded frame, but he was against those corner ornaments and all that goopy stuff that comes with historic frames. He felt like they disrupted from the image, and he wanted these kind of reeded frames, these fluid lines, kind of waterfall, linear frames. And in 1992, I think it was, we were fortunate enough to find a frame that fit the millinery shop, with Kirk's help, and that we consider a Degas style. And it was here for the exhibition Degas Beyond Impressionism, which went on to London. And in London, they actually put our framed painting on the front page. Was it the Telegraph? I don't know, whatever it was, one of those. And they were so excited. They thought it was so important that we had bought this frame. And our then director, James Wood, he got really excited. We had been reframing some of our masterworks in the Impressionist collection, but then he saw the attention that this was given, and suddenly we had carte blanche to go on a frame campaign to reframe some 22 of our Impressionist paintings.
Yeah, I always think we should put a little shrine under the painting that was for the frame gods.
This is the one.
This
is
one
what
that
started
really
it. This is what gave us
yeah.
And interestingly enough, Renoir and Monet, unlike Pissarro and Degas, weren't against historic frames at all, but they didn't want the reproduction 19th century frames. They wanted the 18th century frames, the carved frames. Oh, this is another example. I should have shown you this one. So this is before, and this is exactly what Degas didn't want with those big corner ornaments. And we were able to reframe that. But this is the end result from reframing three variants, our trio, on the terrace flanked by the restaurant Fornez and near the lake, which we were able to find historic frames in the style that he would have liked. Now, Monet also liked 18th century frames, but he liked the Louis XIII, which has a much more modest profile. And so we reframed the 6 stacks of wheat, grain stacks, whatever, that we have here. And these aren't originals. We did not find Louis XIII frames, but we found, the equivalent of. And it makes them not only feel like an ensemble, as they were, the series paintings, but also it was important, we felt, to respect the artist's intentions. So this idea, but just as Seurat radicalized, he took the Impressionist ideas about modern life subjects and thinking about color and light, but just as he radicalized that in a completely new vocabulary, technique, and scale, he also had radical ideas about framing that went way beyond what Degas and Pissarro were talking about. And it's these ideas and this evolution that Kirk has been researching over the years as we've done these different permutations on the frame. And so I'm going to turn not the mic, because you have your mic, I'm going to turn the clicker over to you so that you can share with us this amazing research.
Yeah, along with the shrine under the Degas frame, I think there should be a little shrine to Gloria and Douglas Druick as well, who there was a stewardship over the. Oh, I'm sorry. To Gloria and Douglas Druick over the past 35 years, they've really given an entirely new vision to the 19th century frames in the collection, and so. We're very fortunate at the Art Institute that actually you have a pretty good idea of the frame history walking hand in hand with the art history, and it's really due to their sponsorship.
And to have someone who is an expert on frames and who is the ultimate craftsman. So back to you.
Okay, so we'll go to Seurat as a framer now.
Now we can leave.
We've just concluded the reframing of one in a long line of frame and gallery presentations for Seurat's masterpiece. We thought that it'd be really great to present the overall project to put everybody's efforts in context, not only the most recent effort, but through the other efforts in the past at the museum. And it was also to give you a chance not to only appreciate the history of the painting's presentation over the past 135, 36 years, but a chance to appreciate Seurat as a framer. He really is one of the most brilliant, innovative framers of the 19th century, and sadly, a lot of people don't really recognize that, and we'll kind of bring up why during the talk a little bit. But he was well ahead of his time in the direction that the framing would take. The combination of the abstract and the cerebral aspects of his work and their frames really helped change the perception and the relationship that the paintings would take into the modern gallery setting of the next century. Every artist would be well to choose his frame. He should pick one that should show the work to its best advantage and be careful to subordinate it to the areas of the painting to which it is closest. And here, at the age of 16, Seurat read and became familiar with Eugene Chevrel's influential text on color theory. And here you see some diagrams from that text, as well as Seurat's palette from the Musée d'Orsay. Chevrel dedicated actually an entire chapter in his text to the framing of interior wall panels and the borders of contrasting harmonies. And as a young student starting in 1778 at the École des Beaux-Arts, through fellow students, who had apprenticed with Puvis Duchamp on mural projects, he was familiar with his painted frames and non-gilded elements. An unexpected deep impression resulted when Seurat and his fellow students visited the 1879 Impressionist exhibit. The use of white frames and an exhibition space mostly devoid of the usual gilt and drapery decorations of the dealers' galleries and salon left open new possibilities. They also had a chance to see Mary Cassatt's frames that were pretty radical at the time, done in vermilion and green. The exhibition of 1880 went further with walls and strong colors and contrasting colors used between frames and painting of wall color and trim. But there was starting to be a little bit of a backlash. Pizarro, commenting on Whistler's elaborate framing presentations in his London exhibits, described them as a little puffy. And the push for the younger artists were toward a more simpler approach. Seurat's submission of the bathing place was rejected by the Salon of 1883, and with the newly formed Society of Artists of Independence, the painting was exhibited in 1884 and hung behind the bar. And unfortunately, we have no record of its frame. Most of the early exhibition frames of Seurat at this time, we really don't have, with one exception I'll show you later. We have no idea really what they looked at. We only have secondhand descriptions through fellow artists writing letters to each other and brief mentions of them in little bits of criticism. Seurat was planning to exhibit the Grand Jatte and the 1885 Salon de Independence. However, the exhibition was postponed. At the time, a friendship had developed between him and Pizarro's excitement with Seurat's painting technique led him to push to be included in the next exhibition, but he really had a lot of blowback from some of the other artists. What's that?
He was an upstart.
Yeah, upstart, exactly. And so, but he was included in the exhibition, which ran from May through mid-June of 1886. And we start to get the first mentions of his white frames and the fact that the works were glazed, including the Grand Jatte. The Grand Jatte was most probably framed in the way you see in this painting of the models. This is the famous large-scale painting that's at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia. Leaning against the studio wall, you can see the heavy white frame. It's a wide profile, and it is sort of a gentle cushion shape, and it has two torus inner and outer moldings, which are half rounds. It might also be a little bit just an angled flat with a fillet at the front and then a round at the outside. We don't really know. But also curiously, if you look on the back wall, you can see some, and I haven't been able to make out which paintings there are. I've tried and tried and tried to see some of these early exhibition frames might have looked like at this time period. Also, if you notice along the edge of the rabbet of the frame, you'll find a detail missing that you're probably all familiar with, and that's Seurat's wonderful inner painted border. This would come later. About 1886, something really starts to shift in Seurat's thinking about the edges and the treatment of the edges of the painting. And if you look at this, this painting along this edge, right, you'll notice a totally different paint handling. The brush strokes get much broader, more excited. The color chroma comes way up. And on the other side, it's another treatment, but a little bit lighter. In the preparatory drawing, you'll also notice it looks like it's almost laid on another piece of paper, and he's introduced this funny edge all the way around that's sort of in focus and out of focus with the composition at the same time. At this time, he was working on the picture in the Barnes collection, the models, and he was producing wonderful sketches and preparatory drawings, much like he did for the Grand Jatte. And you'll notice that on this sketch, you see also these little dark areas that are still part of the composition, but like a little change of frequency, it seems like almost, and color. It just changes the relationship and the harmony a little bit. But suddenly now you have these wonderful, independent, broad, abstract bands that sort of float above the composition, which is quite exciting. And if you notice on this study of the seated model, these dark framed areas interpainted frame areas that seem to make the painting go back in space slightly and along the top. But if you look at the bottom edge, he's gone with a much lighter palette, and it makes the whole composition seem like it's elongated. So he's really using these frame ideas in a variety of ways. It's not just a border anymore. He's got this dialogue that's going on from transition to transition through the painting. And it's not a one-way dialogue. It's what he's doing on the outside is really affecting the way you perceive the inside. Sorry. So I'm going to introduce my favorite sport these days. We're so lucky to be in Chicago to be able to see this painting on such a regular basis. And so I really urge you next time you go up in the galleries to take a look at the painting. And now that Gloria's lowered the painting a little bit so it's easier to see and you can get right up to it, you really have to go and look at all the borders of all the figures and the trees and all these transitions that he makes between colors and the surrounds, between the foreground and the background. And you'll really see the birthplace of his frames.
We also took the stanchions away.
Yeah, the stanchions
So
away,
you can
right.
get right up close to it. I mean,
Yeah.
the guard's going to say something, but, you know, it's got glass on it. But you can get a lot closer.
Yeah, and it's really delightful. I mean, when you look at the handling of the paint along the edge, you know, he's making color transitions, of course, but he's also creating this sense of light, and the sense of light is coming actually out of the paint. You get a sense of the way the light reflects off of something as it turns, and he's really a master of these transitions. They have sort of a haloing effect around the figures, but and this is all things that he's later going to move out to the edge of the painting. He's been doing this already, but after 1886, he really starts to migrate this whole thinking to the edge of the canvas. So.
And I don't think anyone's ever put that together before. I think that's you. I think you should write this up. No, but I mean, this is like good stuff.
Yeah. So this is really fun. If you look at now this couple right here holding the baby was added until the second wave of work on the painting, and the painted borders on the Grand Jatte were added in 1888, 1889. But I want you, and it's really fun to see it in person, but I want you to just look at the color along this edge and along this edge, and then just look at what he's done here. And the side of the tree, and there. It's, you know, he's already been doing it, but he just, all of a sudden, you can see like the light bulb comes out. And you know, this is just pure speculation on my part, but I think when you saw his studio, how beautiful it was, a white studio, he's controlling the whole environment. When he's actually starting to see his works out in the world, he realizes, oh, you know, maybe I have to work something in a transition zone to sort of keep my harmonies in place. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. So at this time, Pizarro pops by to see the work progressing on the model, and he writes a letter that says, what the most astounding thing is the execution of the frame. I just have seen just the beginning. And later he basically promises he's going to steal the idea, but not until Seurat exhibits it first. Nice guy.
It's so sad that this monumental painting cannot be seen with ours. Ours doesn't leave, this one doesn't leave the Barnes collection, so they remain this way, right?
Exactly.
You can only
Yeah.
virtually unite them.
So when the models is completed, and you notice that this is the frame, you know, that this is the frame that, you know, Pizarro was maybe talking about, and actually we have a slide a little bit later on that may be another part of the frame that he was also talking about. But he did something like that just as astonishing to me at this time. You know, here's a young artist who is really in his prime, making waves, and with this development of these framed borders, he basically goes back in time and he starts reworking the edges of his older completed canvases, which is phenomenal. So luckily, the Grand Jatte was one of those he tried to do. He took the painting off the stretcher, flattened out the edges, primed them with lead white, and then added the inner painted frame. And also did it to, this is a preparatory sketch that's at the Metropolitan Museum that's absolutely beautiful, but you see he also went back and did that. He also did a landscape for the work, but he went back even further, and some of the works he would just take them off and expand them, but on other works he'd actually paint back into the composition, which is the case of the painting here, where it's actually painted on the original composition. And he also, we were talking about the dialogue back and forth. At this time, he not only does that, but he goes back and he reworks paint across almost the entire sea area that then reunites with the frame in a more sophisticated way. And then here's the landscape we were talking about, and another work that's reworked. But it boggles my mind to think about it, because it's like, to do this, it must have been so important that he would stop progress on future works, plus all of the expense. He'd have to throw out all of his frames, have to throw out all of his glass, restretch paintings. It really shows that this must have been a crucial switch in his thinking. And I really think, Gloria, we could argue that from this point on, it's like you can think of them as frames, but they really are just a continuation of the painting.
Extensions of his ideas, yeah. I'm thinking he didn't have a dealer. He wasn't being pushed like
Yeah.
Monet was to
Yeah.
churn him out. I mean, he could really work within him. He could just work for himself.
Yeah.
And
There's a funny little detail going back to Pizarro. Pizarro was arranging an exhibition of a few of his paintings, of Seurat's paintings at Durand-Ruel. And Pizarro is writing back and forth, and Seurat's asking for modern frames and modern lighting, gas lighting. And Durand-Ruel writes back, "Oh God, no, not both modern frames and modern lighting."
the 20th century white cube.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So also at this time, these painted borders, we've kind of, in the house, we've kind of been calling them passe-partout frames. Passe-partouts were sort of, they're like, it almost translates like a pause between the artwork and the outer frame or the outer world. And I think it's so apropos to talk about Seurat's frames at this time as passe-partout, because they are these pauses, and it's almost, he's like changing the way you're looking at the work and the dialogue back and forth. So at this time, he started to adapt this profile. It's just a flat, thin fillet frame as a standard. Sometimes he would paint the inner border like we talked about, and sometimes he would, like in this example, he would paint exactly on the frame. And you can really just start to tell the color dialogue is just amazing. Like the light upper part of the frame, when you look at the color harmonies are really sophisticated, but also you get a sense that the light on the frame is being reflected off the ocean and the clouds almost. It's really amazing, but very subtle, and also very abstract. And the painting on these frames, when you get a chance to see them in person, is absolutely gorgeous. They're just sumptuous, just like his other works. This is just a gem of a photograph, and I think it gives us the best idea of Seurat's thinking toward the end of his life. This is in an exhibition after his death in Antwerp in 1892. But you can kind of see a really clear picture of what he was thinking was about the edge. And it's so radical from some of the frames that Gloria was sharing earlier in the Impressionists. You notice that, I wanted to point out the one photograph we have of an early frame. This actually is probably what his earliest frames look like. This was actually bought from Seurat, from an artist friend, and was loaned back to this exhibition. So this was probably the one image we have of what his earliest frames look like. But you'll see the model's painting here, and it's in this Passepartout sort of profile. But also look at the edge, and I mean, it definitely looks like it's also handled in a pointillist style. You know, you have this painting with a inner painted Passepartout and then a white Passepartout after that. This painting has an inner painted frame on the canvas and this flat outer painted Passepartout and so on. But it's very flat, very related to the painting and just an extension of the painting. And this is just a little tease. I just wanted to show, this is, those of you who are familiar with the collection are going to recognize her right off, but we'll come back to her a little bit later. This is also from the same exhibition. And this I put in for two reasons. One, it's such a beautiful painting and a beautiful frame. This is at the Detroit Institute of
And
Arts.
there are not that many that still exist.
No, there really aren't. It's such a shame. And you
Maybe
just,
8?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that people just jettisoned them because they didn't realize the importance to the artist and to
Yeah.
what he was doing.
Yeah, the pressures, like we talked about a little bit, the pressures from as his works entered the dealer system, you know, people weren't used to seeing things like this, and it was shocking. And the dealer wanted to make the sale, so make it look like an old master, you know, put something rich on it that would go with the interiors that they were dealing with. But also just, I mean, this is the same, I mean, the quality of the image isn't so good, but it's also, I mean, look at this beautiful warm transition from warm to cool, and then look at how he even varies the inner to the outer. I mean, it's really a sophisticated color game he's playing, you know, not only within the painting, but the way that your mind picks up the color on the outer frame is really affecting the way you're perceiving the inner painting. And then the other thing I wanted to show is that on this frame, look at how incredibly thin the rabbit is. It's just like 1/8 of an inch. So he really was interested in just this continual flat surface that he was working on. And if you notice on the side, it's just priming. So he's painting along, and when it comes to the side where it turns and becomes architecture, he just loses interest. He has no interest in it being decorative. He has no interest in the objectivity of it. He has no interest in the architecture of the frame. It's just a painting.
He could not have put glass on that one, though. We know he put glass on the Grand Jade, as you know.
Yeah.
But I don't think that would have been able. Is it so thin, that rabbit?
Yeah, very, very thin. I think they were floating them on there. I mean, we wouldn't do that these days, but
Right.
and this may have had an outer frame. We don't know. You know, that's always been my question. Since the edge was raw, did he just stop painting, or you know, it could have had an outer molding that was removed, but we just don't know. But thank goodness that we have the inner frame.
Good for Detroit.
Yeah, good for Detroit. So toward the end of his life, he had another little shift in his thinking about frames. And this painting actually was first shown in a light gray, like a gris-colored frame. And then later he reworked this. And he started to do these really dense, from a distance they look very dense and sort of twilighty, I guess would be a good way to describe them, frames. And he started to get blowback from some of the younger artists in his circles, like, why are you abandoning the white frames? Those were so beautiful, you know, and you were really modern sort of presentation. And he described it. Richard Wagner had done a performance not too long before where he had actually darkened the auditorium and just had left the orchestra lit. And Seurat had written that he wanted to have the focus of the painting to become something more like that, where the painting would just glow and then you would slowly enter the color. But I mean, and it really does look like that when you see them from afar. They're very, very sort of twilighty, but when you, and this is also to show in a preparatory sketch for the circus. I always get a kick out of this because if you look at the way that the frame is painted, he's actually much more complete in what he's thinking about than in some of the passages of the rest of the painting. So again, it just shows how important he felt grounding this was to then get into the composition. So these are some details of that circus frame, and you can see how different it looks when you get up close. From the back, he's blended it out so that it's very quiet. But actually, when you get up into viewing distance, they're incredibly energetic and almost iridescent in the color. The whites, even the whites that are underneath the surface color, he's using a blend of whites. Some are cool, some are a little warmer. And then he floats this over. And then when you look at again, the relationship between this is the inner painted frame on the canvas, and then the outer frame, and here as well. He always playing little bits of difference between them. It's really amazing stuff to my eye.
Oh, it's fascinating. I
Yeah.
think that's what Bridget Riley was looking at, too. I think she was looking at his frames
Exactly.
as well as his, yeah.
Exactly.
Super cool.
And just before his death, he was playing with an idea that we talked about a little earlier with the models composition. He started to add these, on some of his paintings, these little curves on the inner painted frame. And this is a letter where he's describing what he's thinking. He felt that like these curves, their top or bottom, would force the composition in different directions and make your eye move in a certain way. But I mean, I think he was already doing that. Like when you look at the Grand Jatte, for goodness sakes, it's like that's like a complex dance of where he wants you to look, depending on the way he's handling the paint across the surface. It's absolutely amazing.
That would have been terrible if he had done that. We had to make that frame.
Oh yeah, exactly. No thanks.
We'd still be working on it.
So unfortunately, shortly after his death, sort of the unframing of Seurat started to happen, and I think that's why, we really don't understand, how important that actually was to him. This is a gallery, a Seurat exhibition of 1936 at Paul Rosenberg Gallery, and you'll notice some of our old friends here. This is the model, and you can see inside we still have his original white frames on these, but now they're encrusted with these frames to make them look more valuable. And this one we'll come back to, but you notice that we saw this earlier, it still has the inner painted frame, but now we have this massive bit of ornament and gold on it. And isn't it amazing how it changes the way you perceive it? I think when you reframe Seurat in these gold frames, you really focus on what he's depicting. And when the frames are done by his hand, he makes you focus on the fact you're looking at painted light. Everything is paint, 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 paint. And you go between the dialogue of the frame back in, and it gives you a better understanding of what he's doing and things. So you're enjoying it not only as the representation of whatever the subject matter is, but it's like he's constantly showing you this is a painted surface. Which is amazing.
It's so sad that in 1936 they've already had modernism. And they're still putting them in gold frames. And as you know, how if you've tried to light a gold frame that has a lot of protruding elements, it's going to cast a shadow. It's really difficult to see the full surface. We play with that all the time in the galleries.
Exactly.
So what a disappointment.
Yeah, it really is.
Just slap those on them.
It really is sad. And then even if the frames were maintained, like this is the painting, you can now see this at the Musée d'Orsay of the circus.
Bought after hours.
Yeah, but but you'll notice that a gold frame to hold the glass has been added, and this is sort of done in a style that some of his followers would adopt in Holland in particular. But you also notice that they've got this wonderfully beautiful, large thing, but it's on the painting. That's what I say. Oh, they put that on the painting. So I thought we'd just go through and go give a little bit of our history with the Grand Jatte and the framing and reframing of it. And we've talked about this original frame and the fact that it was probably abandoned at the point when he started this new campaign where the edge of the painting became part of the painting. And this shot's just absolutely wonderful, don't you think, Gloria?
Oh, yeah.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
So this is probably the first owner of the painting, if correct. And
Given to her by her father on her birthday. Wouldn't you like to? You know, her uncle was a picture dealer, though, so there is a connection. Yeah.
So here's Lucy in front of her easel. She was an artist as well. And you see in the background, it's a little hard to read, but that's the Grand Jatte mounted on the wall. The little border that you kind of see along here is actually like a frame railing of the wall itself rather than an engaged frame on the painting. But kind of amazing.
That's the way that Frederick Clay Bartlett and his wife would have seen it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So,
Unless she'd taken it off by then.
yeah, that's always a really big...
Maybe she had it off so they could. Maybe, I was saying that's the way Frederick Clay Bartlett would have seen it when they went to Paris, but maybe she'd already taken it off the wall. I mean, somehow they had to get that, it's glued.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe, we don't know. We
Yeah,
just
we
don't
don't know.
know
Yeah.
what they saw.
Yeah, and we don't know, unfortunately, we don't know how the Grand Jatte arrived. You know, like, was it framed when it came to the
Right,
museum,
right.
or was it rolled, or was it on a stretcher? Unfortunately, we have we know who the shipper was,
Yeah. We have labels.
but we don't know how it arrived. But by a miracle, Mr. Bartlett was able to acquire this painting in 1924,
Yep.
and I believe
July.
it arrived July 7th, 1924 at the Art Institute. And Mr. Bartlett was also an artist, and so the first frames for the Art Institute were actually designed by Mr. Bartlett for the collection. And here you see, and they went back again to like some more modern approach. This is just a simple white fillet frame that's on the outside, and you see some of these are also in a frame that I've got a better picture of actually this is from an exhibition at MoMA, and you'll see, everybody will recognize our Van Gogh's Bedroom at Arles and our Gauguin, which is incredible. But you can actually see what his frame design looked like. And then, oh my gosh, look who's here from the Detroit Art Institute, our old friend. So it's really fun that these paintings keep having these interactions over time. It's kind of one of the joys of doing the research. And then I think probably the pressure of the World's Fair coming in '33, Mr. Bartlett redesigned frames, and you saw some of them in the first picture, but he came up with two styles. One's an Italian style, like a cassetta frame with a gray washed frame. I'll show you a picture of it in a second, but it's on the Rousseau. But here you see, he's kept with almost the same profile, but now it's a gilded frame. And this is a close-up of the Toulouse-Lautrec at the Moulin Rouge in one of Mr. Bartlett's design frames.
And we keep it in this one because we can't find anything that's better on the market. And now after this, I feel like we should keep it. It should just be in the frame that Bartlett designed.
Yeah.
That has a lot of history.
Yeah.
It's not exactly what I'd like to see it in, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's on my wish list.
I know, we've been trying to reframe it for a while.
Then here's a great picture of Charles Laughton looking at the same frame. But you can also see in this picture, you can see that the Grand Jatte's always been under glass. And it's an incredible condition because of it. So right after the World's Fair, 35, that you'll notice our old friend from the models example, model frame is back. This was the first of two attempts that the museum made at trying to frame it in this style. But of course, at this time they were lacking the research of when the painting was expanded. And a lot of the research was done here at Conservation and Science Labs, along with other scholars from around the world that came in to work on it. We really have a better understanding of the timeline of the Grand Jatte's creation and what was added when. And unfortunately, I think these early attempts at this frame, they're still looking at the best example that they can find, but it's with information that probably wasn't relevant anymore. And then here's a photo of it on its one journey outside the museum when it went to New York to the Museum of Modern Art for that leg of the Seurat retrospective. And if you're wondering why the Grand Jatte is never loaned anymore, while it was at New York, unfortunately, a fire broke out in MoMA on the second floor. It was a really big tragedy. MoMA lost some works. Fortunately, the Grand Jatte survived, but it really made the trustees re-examine all the safety policies around our collection, and at that time it was decided that the Grand Jatte would never leave the museum again. And then you notice there's kind of a up and down. We were going from these modern frames to something a little more conservative, to modern to a little conservative. So this was a Louis XVI sort of reproduction frame that was on the frame for quite some time. And this was the first frame I saw as a child. And Gloria can probably speak a little more about this. For the 100th anniversary of the painting, a big wave of scholarship was undertaken, and as a part of the scholarship, re-examination of the frame, everyone thought, oh, we have to get away from this, the Louis XVI frame doesn't have anything to do with Seurat. So once again, without the research that would come from our own institution later on, the decision was to make another one of these post frames that were in the model. And of course, you all recognize Cameron, who is falling deeply in some kind of visual dialogue with the little girl in the white hat, back and forth, back and forth. But it kind of reminds me of a lot of our staff. We do the same thing.
We have so many photos of people standing exactly where he is. I think they do it on purpose, and
Oh,
then
really?
they send them to us. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's really funny. Oh,
Yeah.
That's great. So in 2004, there was an incredible exhibit here, and I hope some of you remember it. It's the making of the Grand Jatte. And there was a really big wave of research that was done, and a lot of what I was talking about earlier was leading up to this. And one of the discoveries was the dating of the different waves of work through analysis of the pigments, and they also discovered certain working techniques. There's a slight grid work that was underneath the painting that nobody really knew about before. It's a fascinating catalog. If you can get a copy of it, it's a really great read. But the painting kit was brought out of the galleries and brought up to the lab, and here you see sort of the part of the working group in the
I
conservation
love this
lab.
picture of Kirk. He's kneeling. He's
Yeah.
literally kneeling at the Grand Jatte.
I'm making another one of my frame shrines. But the exhibition, and thanks to Gloria and Douglas, was just stunning. They somehow were able to pull so many of the preparatory paintings and drawings, everything leading up to, and it culminated in this wonderful gallery where you had all the supporting material in circles around the artwork, and you could go back and forth between the two. It was like you got a master's degree without even trying.
Were there any original frames?
There were. The Detroit painting, I think, was there, if I remember correctly.
Was it in?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, but it
in
was
the
earlier.
Courtois, I think.
Right. It was
Yeah,
earlier. Okay, it
yeah.
was in the earlier galleries. But none of the preparatory drawings still have their original frames. They were all
No, I think even
the small paintings.
Yeah.
I think so.
No, I only no, not for the.
Yeah.
We had to recreate a lot of them, if you
Yeah,
remember.
yeah.
Yeah. And just a funny aside is like one of my 9 lives was lost during this exhibition. Thanks to a wonderful company in Chicago, TrueView, part of the work of this reframing impetus was also when we took the painting down and took it out of the glass, we realized that the glass had discolored terribly. It was so yellow, and it really was affecting the way you read the painting. And so Jim Wood at the time went, and I don't know what he did, he begged, borrowed, and stole, but he convinced this wonderful company that does some of the best glazing for artwork in the world, they're really the leader, to commission a piece for us to reglaze the Grand Jatte, because they couldn't make anything at this scale. So there was this long dance in this timeline that kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and the first piece of glass arrived, and we opened the crate, and it was broken. And
And
so,
it's shock resistant, right? It's
Yeah.
supposed to be museum glass, so that was a bad sign.
yeah. So we all just
1 week before
maybe
the
that was
opening.
yeah, 1 week before the opening. That was my first life, and the second life came as like the second glass arrived. Hopefully, it was safe, but we went to go frame it, and this was, I think we had like 12 hours before opening, and we were installing the painting, and we turned the painting around, and it was like my sight size of the painting was off. It was like shifted the wrong way. And I remember turning around, and Douglas and Gloria were there, and Douglas had this like deathly laser beam eye, and I just thought, if I don't get this fixed in 12 hours, I am dog meat.
But you did.
Yeah, we got it done.
Yeah.
So now we're up to the present day, and I don't know if you've enjoyed some of the refreshed galleries around Allerton Hall, but they're really doing wonderful work on color and representing works that haven't been seen for a while. And as part of this concept, the director wanted to see if we could do something to refresh the painting. And we also had problems with that frame from 2004. It still looked too heavy, and the combination of it on this white wall just wasn't working. And so we started to think of a combination of really refining the paint wall color so that it would be more sympathetic, but then also try to get as much as we could with even having to carry the weight, this light look on the painting itself. So here you see some of the myriad of corner samples we did of like different colors of white. And they don't look like much, but actually when you put them up to the painting, it was pretty dramatic how it would affect the work. So a color was selected, and then we could go ahead and build the frame. And here you see the incredible mess of our conservation frame shop, especially when it's full of these whales. And you see the frame in the background with some of the paint layers drying, and I'm working on the back frame that attaches. You can see how thin we were able to make it, and this is going to attach to the back, and it actually helps hold the weight, some of the weight of the glass.
It's 300-something pounds.
Yeah, for the glass alone. Yeah. So we're thinking that the whole thing probably weighs close to
400.
Yeah, more than that. I think 5. So it's a lot of load to carry.
And how many layers of paint went into the white part, the outer frame?
It was about like 8. And also it's like that was my next life I lost, was that the paint was drying so
I wasn't gonna bring
slowly.
that up.
We try to keep the painting on view as long as possible, because we really hate to have it off view, because everybody gets so disappointed, and people actually, of course, travel to the city to see it. And so we tried to make that window incredibly tight, but I think we made it a little too tight. And then here's just some details of making it. We had to, so I didn't make my same mistake again. You see Chris Brooks from the framing staff here helping me make a template, so we actually had all of the angles. When you look at the painting in the gallery up in 240, take a look at it. Looks really square, but it's actually a trapezoid. And then the inner edge that he painted along, because he was stretching it, it really is contoured on all different shapes. So part of the challenge, it's such a simple looking frame, but the part of the challenge is to get that frame to line up exactly on that edge so that you can see everything that Seurat painted. And you can kind of see this, the little bit of the joinery that we had to use. Since it's so thin, we made a lap joint that's dovetailed on the back. This is the back of the joint, so that when it's glued together, it's really, really strong. And then here you see me starting to contour the inside of Rabbit to the painting, the sight line. And then once I had that set, so we had a perfect match with the painting, then I had to bring the frame back down and then make it square again to fit the glass.
That's when it got a little tight.
Yeah, that's when it got a little tight.
Then you could paint.
Then,
Oh my gosh.
Why don't you go, Gloria?
Oh my gosh. So there were ideas about the color of the accent wall. So we made a bump out wall because we thought we'd give it a little more oomph in that gallery. And can you imagine the Grand Jatte on lavender? I'm sorry. And one of the last ones that got up to almost to the top was that first yellow that you're seeing. Wasn't it the first or the second?
Yeah, the second one, I think.
And so
yeah.
we were in the background because it's by committee. So there's lots of people, including the director. And we're going, you know, I mean, because all the work that Kirk has done on these color harmonies and how Seurat thought so carefully about everything, and it was about to go out the door. But then the next slide shows
Yeah.
that Reason won over,
Yeah.
and we were able to go back to, I think it's called Gray Shower.
Yeah.
But the actual color that the bump out wall is something I can't remember, but it's a silvery
Yeah.
blue, but it's nice. It picks up on, it makes the painting pop without killing it.
Yeah. Well, Gloria and I are both totally gun shy because we've seen this painting moved from wall color to wall color to wall
Yeah.
color. So we were already totally soaked in the dangers of doing that. But I thought you'd really enjoy seeing that slide. And even in that slide, you can see, you know, you get that much chroma near the painting. And it's like everything he's doing is like gets interfered with. It's like somebody's turning on the static in the color field.
Yeah. Let's go on.
And this is just a wonderful shot of, you know, it's like the grand shot doesn't get out much, but here it got a wonderful tour of the galleries.
Yeah. So it's on just an A-frame. It's not it's unframed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was exciting.
So I just wanted to, you know, show these two other paintings, the one with the red arrow and then this painting that we've already talked a little bit about. And I wanted to show that, like, the Art Institute isn't the only museum that's having problems with this. It's like once that initial artist's vision is disrupted, it's impossible to get back. And I thought it would be just amusing for everybody to see another institution, in this case MoMA, and before MoMA with some of the examples, dealing with two paintings that have also lost parts of their frames. Like the painting with the red arrow, luckily retains the inner painted Passepartout frame, but the outer frame, the white frame, is missing. And in the case of the painting with the anchor, the inner painted border is on the canvas, but the outer painted Passepartout frame was lost. So let's just go really quickly and we'll see. So these are how the paintings appear now. And here you see back at the gallery, Rosenberg, the painting without the painted frame at this point, already in 37. And then here it is again in 1958, a different frame, still in private hands. It enters the MoMA's collection, and then all of a sudden, you know, they're back again. It's like, oh, the massive overframe was taken off, but now they have these little cap frames, both on it and the other painting next to it, so probably to facilitate glazing. And so I think they tried that out, and that was probably too much. And then they went to vitrines to just show exactly, you know, what they had. In the case of, you know, the Passepartout frame is now protected under the glazing, and the piece that has lost its frame is now just shown with the edges of the canvas showing. And then, because it's always cyclical, there you see it back in a gold frame again. And I also think this is the preparatory study that's at the Met that we talked about earlier. And I just thought it would be interesting for you to see, after all this talk of, you know, like you see the bowl on this gold frame is really pronounced in red. And it's so interesting how it really changes entirely the way you look at the painting. It's like it kind of takes away from the fact this painting is like painted so boldly, but it kind of solidifies everything a little bit. And then just a few last, it's kind of an amusing ones. We've talked about this frame with the pointless frame that was unfortunately lost very early, I think. It's just heartbreaking. But then all of a sudden, by 1906, it is bought by the Kessler family, and this is their Weimar residence that was entirely designed by Henry van de Velde, the artist and sculptor as well. And you'll notice that the models has suddenly shrunk quite considerably. He designed a square box frame, and within it, the painting's been taken off the stretcher and it's been rolled to just show a third of the painting at this point, and everything else is inside. So, you know, it's so sad. Once you lose that initial genius, it's just the sorry slope.
And it is so ironic because Henri van de Velde was trying to make the total interior and everything would harmonize with it, but he destroyed a painting to do it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he didn't, rip it up, but still, that's so awful.
Yeah, exactly.
Awful.
And then just
Yeah.
to let you know too, this is always an ongoing pursuit. Like we always have like this wish list that goes on for miles. And this is another puzzle that we're going to have to face at one time. We mentioned it earlier, the George Lemelin portrait of the artist's sister that you're probably familiar with. And then the blue arrow is actually this piece that has retained its pointillist frame. And you can just look at how beautiful this is. This is before pointillism, especially on the frames, got really decorative. You can really see he's learned the lessons that Seurat, he's basically copying the sort of interaction. And then this is how our painting is now framed, and and what we wish we had.
And the frame and the painting is now in storage, but we will, if we can get it properly framed, I think we'll bring it out and highlight it again.
Yeah.
Well,
It's one of the amazing things about this whole process, I think, that, we've seen time and time again our paintings that are, like kind of clumsy for some reason. A lot of times if the frame is resolved properly, they go from like B string paintings to A string paintings like right away. It's like all of a sudden, oh, now I understand what he was doing. And I think, this is a classic case where, the paint on the missing frame would have activated the paint on the inner frame, and instead, because it's kind of framed like you'd expect a portrait to be framed, you instantly just focus on the sitter and the representation and not the paint handling. So anyway, this will be a challenge because what do we do? Huh?
yeah, we love it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your patience.
We got through with it.
Yeah.